The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
These are the countries that receives the most aid from the United States. First up, we have Egypt. Egypt receives about $1 billion, which is aimed at strengthening security and ensuring stability in the Middle East. Next up is Jordan. Jordan receives $1.1 billion in economic assistance and $470 million in military aid. Then we have Israel. Israel receives nearly $4 billion annually, which includes $3.3 billion for military financing and $500 million for missile defense programs. This aid is mostly allocated under the Foreign Military Financing Program, which allows Israel to purchase U.S. military equipment and services. Also, since October 7th, Biden administration requested an additional $14.3 billion for arms to Israel, in addition to the annual $3.8 billion in military aid. At last, we have Ukraine. Ukraine receives $16.6 billion as economic aid from U.S. separate from the economic aid package. The U.S. has also provided Ukraine with another $1.6 billion in security assistance.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, hump day. All right. I listened to my podcast episode from yesterday. Man, I was fired up. I don't know what that was. I'll have to start checking out my coffee intake based on the time I am recording, because I listened to my episode while I was getting my steps in yesterday, and I was like, dude, you sounded like a little rambunctious. I was talking fast. Oh, you know what I think it was, actually? It wasn't my coffee. It was, I think I had just listened to a Candace Owens podcast, and I was like, she speaks so much faster than I do. Maybe I need to speed up my tone in delivering these messages or these episodes. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it better when I'm kind of calm like this, or when I'm all fired up talking about the Jimmy Carter funeral? That was actually the part I noticed it. I was like, dude, you just sound like you're on speed or something. Anyway, all right, I'm going to play a bunch of clips today. I have so much content to cover with you guys. It's crazy. That clip at the beginning, I thought that was interesting, and again, that's just another thing. And by the way, I'm not saying good or bad that we're giving all this money to those 4 foreign countries, but again, these are things that prior to, well, quite frankly, in terms of this, prior to this past year, you just never pay attention to this stuff. You never pay attention to any of this stuff. And now, obviously, we're equipping, foreign countries with so much money. I think that we have to keep that in mind based on what we see the response is to needs here in the United States. And I'm not just talking about Pacific Palisades and Altadena. Again, Altadena, that fire is probably potentially worse than the Palisades, but Altadena doesn't get the attention the Palisades does. Actually, you know what? Let me say something about this, because I meant to cover this yesterday. I think it's so interesting. And again, I'm guilty of it as well. I really am. I look back at the content that I've posted over the past maybe 7 days, and obviously it's heavily skewed to the wildfires in Pasadena. It really is. And everything is heavily skewed that way. And it makes you realize that, we really do live in a society. And again, this is just the truth. It's not good or bad, but we live in a society that I don't want to say rewards, but we really relish, or we give more attention to things that happen in neighborhoods like the Pacific Palisades that are wealthier. The homes are nicer. There's celebrities there. There's more glitz and glamour. It's sexier. And so, I don't know, you have a disaster like what we're experiencing all of the sudden in the Pacific Palisades, and it's like everybody is paying attention. Everybody is talking about it. And then at the same time, you have the same exact thing, if not potentially worse, happening in Altadena, which is, just any town USA. I mean, it's any town USA. It's just a normal town. Or quite frankly, Asheville, North Carolina, the floods that happened there in, I think it was August or September of last year. I'm going to play something about Asheville, North Carolina that someone recorded. Nobody cares. Think back to Hurricane Katrina back in New Orleans, and New Orleans is a big city, but it's a very, poor city, and the areas that were affected were predominantly inner city Black communities. Nobody cares till this day. And let me see, how long ago was Hurricane Katrina? Holy mackerel, Hurricane Katrina was 20 years ago, 2005. And it was interesting, this guy, Wendell, I'm blanking on his last name. He's a Black actor. I love this guy. He was in The Wire and a few other things. Actually, I've played a sound clip of him. He's got a really famous meme sound clip where he's like, "Gotcha, shit." It's like that. It's like shit, like that. You probably know who I'm talking about based on that. But he literally just tweeted something out over the weekend where he's talking about, like, I think he said the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans still is showing significant damage from Hurricane Katrina. And so think about that. It is 20 years removed, and obviously it's still a mess there. But, same thing with Asheville, North Carolina, same thing with, again, I'm fearing Altadena. That's why I'm personally on my Instagram, particularly, I'm trying to bring more attention to Altadena, let alone let's go across the world to Gaza. I mean, if you've actually been paying attention to what has happened in Gaza, that entire town is apocalyptic. I mean, imagine what you're seeing in the Palisades where everything is just demolished in an entire town. Like if you live in Cleveland, imagine all of Cleveland like that. If you live in Chicago, imagine all of Chicago like that. Like it's just a mess. But anyway, my point was, and I meant to make it yesterday, in that, I don't know. I guess we're all sort of, I don't know, enamored with the glitz and glamour to an extent. And so obviously the Pacific Palisades, and again, I 100%, I mean, I can't even imagine what those people are going through. I don't care if they have money. It's not about like, it's not as easy as, oh, who cares? They're rich. They can rebuild. That's not the right attitude, man. There's emotions. There's things that are priceless. There's the concept of literally just sleeping in your own bed, and then the next day you can't sleep in your own bed because there is no bed and there is no bedroom and there is no house. I mean, that is awful. That is awful. I'm going to play a clip from JJ Redick, the coach of the Lakers, that again, it's about empathy for humanity. And it's about empathy for fellow human beings. And I think that needs to transcend, financial status. But again, at the same time, I do think we have to, shift our mindset a little bit and care as much about Altadena, for example, right now, as everybody does about Pacific Palisades. Okay, sorry, that was a little thing I wanted to kind of convey, but let's get into some clips.
Meghan and Harry, these absolute cretins, decide to inject themselves into the devastation in Los Angeles for one reason: to get their faces back on camera and to improve their image. They made sure that their names got in the press, and that was the name of the game. First of all, I got one other thing. When you're actually a member of the royal family, Harry and the British population answers to you, sort of, they're your subjects. Maybe they do need to see you during times of tragedy. You're in America now, and we don't give a shit about you. You're not our fucking prince. You'll never be king. We hate your wife. Stay at home in your $29 million mansion, all right? Stop getting off on the trauma porn of real suffering in Los Angeles.
That was Megyn Kelly, no holes barred, talking about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Wow, not really much else I can add to that, although I will caveat it with, I think Meghan Markle and Megyn Kelly are both very good looking. Dude, what is with me? And having to comment on people's looks. What is wrong with me? That's like 4 people in the past 2 days. The 2 Meghans, Kamala, and Melania. 4 baddies. All right, I'll stop doing that. All right, next up, huge thing yesterday was the Senate confirmation hearings for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. You guys know I am not a fan of this guy. I do not think he's the right choice by any stretch of the imagination. Ironically, I had a good friend from high school call me up yesterday. We hadn't talked in a while. And he said, dude, I feel like you're MAGA. I said, really? Why do you think I'm MAGA? I'm so not MAGA. And by the way, this guy is like super liberal left, although he doesn't admit it. He totally is. But he's like, I feel like you're MAGA. And I'm like, dude, did you look at the past 6 posts on Instagram that came through your feed? All I'm doing is criticizing Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and practically every other Trump cabinet nomination. I go, if I was MAGA, I wouldn't be doing that. And quite frankly, anybody, this is really one of the things I've noticed, and I've pointed it out. Anybody that is MAGA or a Republican, quite frankly, they don't have the guts to criticize anything that Trump does. The only people right now that are doing that are, and again, I don't even put myself on their level, but Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson does it, but he does it in a backhanded way. Candace absolutely does it, and she doesn't criticize Trump, but she does criticize the people. And then the guy I've talked about a few times, Matt Kim, who, you know, he's I would put him under Candace and Tucker, you know, by a couple levels, and then I'm under him probably by a couple levels. But in terms of that, I mean, you can't be super MAGA or even MAGA, and you can't even be really all in on Republicans and criticize any of them. Well, you can and you should, but none of them are doing that. But I absolutely am doing that. So there you go, friend. I'm not going to mention your name. You're wrong. You have a skewed view on the Ray D. All right, listen to this. So this is, man, there's some good ones, but I'm going to play this one for you now.
I assume you'd be willing to submit to an expanded FBI background check that interviews your colleagues, accountants, ex-wives, former spouses, sexual assault survivors, and others, and enable them to come forward.
Senator, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
But you would submit to it and support it.
I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
So Pete Hegseth twice, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks. You know, again, I'm pointing this out because this is exactly the type of things Republicans for 4 years have gone crazy on Democrats for the way they answer. And now their guy is doing the exact same thing. It's hypocritical. And again, like I said, it's completely lame. And this guy he's trash. I'm telling you, he's trash. And if not trash, he's just not qualified for this job. He's 44 years old and a total hothead. So now listen to the rest of this question. I think this is from Senator Rick Blumenthal. Now he gets into his documented results and the documented facts. And this was in regards to Hegseth's management of this military veterans nonprofit, which, by the way, he got fired from.
Thank you. At the end of 2013, shortfall of $130,000. At the end of 2014, shortfall of $428,000. You had a surplus the following year, but then another deficit of $437,000. By the time you left, that organization had deep debts, including credit card transaction debts of about $75,000. That isn't the kind of fiscal management we want at the Department of Defense. We can't tolerate it at the Department of Defense. That's an organization with a budget of $850 billion, not 10 or 15 million, which was the case at those two organizations. And it has command responsibility for 3.4 million Americans. The highest number that you managed in those two organizations was maybe 50 people. Let me ask you, how many men and women now serve in the United States Army? What is Sen's strength?
Senator, I would like an opportunity to respond to
I've asked you a question.
Of my leadership of a veterans organization. Concerned Veterans for America. You're on the VA committee, sir, and I appreciate your service there. The VA Accountability Act and the Mission Act were all brainchilds of Concerned Veterans for America. We used our donor money very intentionally and focused to create policy that bettered the lives of veterans.
Mr. Hegseth, I'm asking you a very simple question. How many men and women currently serve in the United States Army?
Senator, the United States Army, 450,000 on active duty, sir.
And how many in the Navy?
And the Navy is 425, sir.
Well, it's 337 this year. How many in the Marine Corps?
175,000, sir.
172,300. Those numbers dwarf any experience you had by many multiples. I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them. I would support you as the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I don't dispute your communication skills, but I believe that we are entitled to the facts here.
All right. So, I mean, that was fair, actually. And I kind of like the way he ended it. He's like, hey, I'd support you as a spokesperson for the Pentagon. And you know what? I probably would as well, but not in a decision-making leadership role where, you know, your experience. And again, this isn't like a small jump in experience. You know, this is managing what did he say? Like $850 billion budget, billion with a B, you know, well over, I'm sure, 1 million troops. He's just not the guy. He's just not the guy. And again, all this is a Trump quid pro quo, love that term, quid pro quo for Miriam Adelson donating $100 million among Trump's other pro-Israeli donors. And of all the Trump nominations, Hegseth is the biggest pro-Israel voice. And again, this is just the truth. This isn't anything. I'm not even exerting an opinion on this. I'm really not. This is literally just the truth. And I'll prove that to you because here's the next clip. And this is Republican Senator Tom Cotton basically coming to his defense.
During the Biden administration, I want to give you a chance to respond to what they said about you. I think the first one accused you of being a Christian Zionist. I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist.
Isn't that interesting and quite frankly pretty wild that came up? You know, separation of church and state, man. We should not even be talking this stuff in our government, but obviously it's an enormous part of our government. But anyway, give this a listen. I thought that was pretty wild. It's almost like Tom Cotton saying the quiet part out loud.
Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is a great ally.
Thank you. Because another protester, and I think this one was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
All right, there's that. So you guys know how I feel about all that stuff. All right, let's move on.
Nearly 1,000 incarcerated men and women have joined the front lines in a battle against record-breaking wildfires burning across Southern California. They're part of a long-running volunteer program led by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The team say they've been working around the clock cutting fire lines and removing fuel from behind structures to slow fire spread. Inmates are paid a daily wage between $5.80 and $10.24, and an additional $1 per day when assigned to active emergencies. But some think they're getting pennies compared to citizen firefighters who can earn upwards of $100,000 a year. You're just cheap labour, a former incarcerated firefighter said. Kim Kardashian has waded in on the issue too. Posting on Instagram, she said these heroes risked their lives to prove to the community community that they have changed and are now first responders. She called on California Governor Gavin Newsom to raise the incarcerated firefighter pay to a rate that honours a human being risking their life to save our lives and homes. Mr. Newsom has since signed a law so that firefighters would have more career opportunities when they're released.
All right, so this thing's garnered a lot of attention, and it's something that, I mean, I didn't know, but incarcerated inmates basically work as firefighters, and I think they're being a big help. I don't know to how much or what extent, but obviously the more bodies, the better. But anyway, you know, instead of being in jail, I guess they're out helping the firefighters and really being firefighters, but obviously they're getting paid, you know, an unbelievably minimal rate. But it's an interesting topic because, again, I mean, it's like, okay, what should they get paid? I mean, otherwise they're just sitting in their cell. So now you're giving them a chance to be outside, be active. Now, again, I do realize they're fighting fires, and I mean, to many extents, putting their lives on the line. But I don't know. That's an interesting discussion. I mean, I would think they probably all would rather be doing that, even if they weren't getting paid, than just sitting in a cell all day. So anyway, I thought I'd share that. That's actually getting a lot of coverage, and there's a lot of, I mean, discussion about it. But that's another thing that I think there needs to be nuance with that instead of, you know, politicking.
Since nobody hears about Asheville, North Carolina on the news anymore, or as I like to call it, Flint, North Carolina, because some of us still don't have clean water, I figured I'd give you an update. A lot of those people that lost their homes in the flood, still homeless. A lot of the businesses that were here that had to close because of the flood, probably won't come back. And a lot of the artists that are here that make up the economy in Asheville, they're displaced and probably won't return. And they're still finding bodies in random places. There's a ton of people up here that still need assistance, and Asheville is never going to be able to rebuild if it doesn't get its tourism back on track, because the entire town is made up of small business, artists, and tourism. The economy is tanking, and they'll never get it back unless people start to visit again. So if you're thinking of a way that you could possibly help, come visit.
So that kind of speaks to what I talked about earlier. I mean, the insanity is if you look at some of the videos on TikTok about Asheville, North Carolina right now, the place looks like a apocalyptic site still. And it's, you know, 4 months after that happened. So obviously that is not getting the media attention that the Palisades are getting, and you know, Southern California in general, but really it's the Palisades that are getting that media attention. But I did want to play that because that guy is from Nashville. And again, like I said, if you want to see how things were during those floods and how they still are, go on to TikTok and just type in Asheville, North Carolina. It is awful. Absolutely awful. All right, next I want to play this Joe Rogan clip where he's talking about Lahaina, and he's talking about the fires that took place in Maui in Lahaina. And again, that's another case study to kind of what is taking place now in Southern California. You know, that even though Hawaii and Lahaina, Maui, that's obviously much nicer, way more gorgeous than anything, you know, that really didn't get the coverage that the Palisades are getting now. And part of that is because, you know, Hawaii and Maui is obviously 5 hours away from California. So it's probably more difficult to get news, but it's also more remote there compared to, you know, the Palisades in Southern California. And so it's easier to not get news about it. You see what I mean there? But give this a listen.
Here's the real conspiracy about the fires. Like, they haven't done any rebuilding. Those people, they weren't allowed to have insurance inspectors go in there. I don't know if they can now. That people still had to pay their mortgage on those things.
Oh, jeez.
And the thing is, it's like, if you're getting to this point where you don't have anything and you can't rebuild your house and you're fucked, and then they come along and offer you a payment or something, or you get foreclosed on because you haven't paid your mortgage, and then the banks own it, and then whoever the fuck is the developer owns it, and then whatever they want to do for the better good of Maui, they build there, and then these people lose everything. This is what's really scary about it. It's because, like, the way it's being handled is not like you're handling victims of a natural disaster that's horrific and took more lives than any wildfire in the history of this country.
All right, so again, that takes us on to this theme of the way things are being handled and the way things are going to be handled moving forward. And there's a lot of interesting videos and discussions that are getting put out. And let me play this for you because this gal did a really good job of summing up a variety of ulterior thoughts that are being brought to the forefront.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is reportedly collaborating with developers to rezone areas in the Pacific Palisades from single-family homes to multi-unit apartment complexes, focusing on wildfire-affected areas. Newsom has denied these claims. However, critics remain skeptical, warning that if true, could open the door to large-scale developments, transforming one of Los Angeles' most exclusive neighborhoods into a planned smart city. And the story comes off the heels of this clip of the WEF's Klaus Schwab.
No, Los Angeles is one of the cities who told me in 2030 Los Angeles will be private car driven free. And this will allow to transform highways into parks and other public spheres.
And after this week's alleged WEF whistleblower revealing some dark plans.
Every crisis is another step toward their endgame. Take the fires in Los Angeles. This isn't some accident or the result of incompetence. This is a deliberate, calculated attack. They want to reduce us to ashes, and from those ashes, they'll build their new world. But it won't be a world for us. It will be a world for them.
Oof, sounds terrifying. However, in the end, I believe we'll all be okay because unified under the mission of truth and freedom, we are the most powerful force of nature.
I hate when they use those goofy voices like the whistleblower one there. I mean, I know they have to disguise the whistleblower's voice, but that legitimately is what a World Economic Forum whistleblower said. But, you know, it's like you start using those voices and it makes everything kind of hokey and too conspiracy-ish, you know what I mean? But anyway, so she really nailed the thought process that is starting to percolate to the forefront. And, you know, again, I mean, who knows? But everything's plausible, as you know, I like to say that. But fundamentally, I will say this was let me play now an interesting interview from the one and only Gavin Newsom on NBC's Meet the Press, and pay particular attention to the words he uses. And then if you could see the video, it's pretty crazy. Dude was like conducting an orchestra with his hands. I've never seen him talk so much with his hands. It was like he was signing the speech, which obviously he wasn't, but man, it was a little strange. I'm going to see if anything comes of that. I've never seen Gavin Newsom talk this much with his hands as he did in this interview, but give this a listen. And like I said, pay particular attention to the word choice.
Over the course of the next several years, Los Angeles will be host to the World Cup, and then the Super Bowl, and then the Olympics. With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all of those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA. We thank him for that. This is an opportunity for him to shine, for this country to shine, for California and this community to shine. The opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan.
All right, so considering the National Guard is here and they're talking about implementing martial law, using the term Marshall Plan was probably not, actually, I shouldn't say not. People were like, wait a minute, why did he use the word Marshall?
A Marshall Plan. We already have a team of looking and reimagining LA 2.0.
That was the second part of this that's getting incredibly scrutinized because people are weirded out that he positioned it as reimagining LA version 2.0.
Looking and reimagining LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just the folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged.
Anyway, we'll keep an eye on that stuff, you know, between that gal's initial take and then that, it's definitely raising eyebrows. All right, we're doing some serious clips today. Okay, one more. Well, maybe two more. But listen to this one. This is bringing up kind of the George Bush, Dick Cheney, neoconservative, the old playbook. And I'm telling you, history repeats itself. It really does. I've really learned that history absolutely repeats itself. And you know, they basically look to tried and true things that have worked based on their criteria of what it means to work. So give this a listen.
People who don't remember, George Bush was the president back then, and his vice president was Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney, before he became vice president of the United States, was CEO of a company called Halliburton, which is a huge multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company that provides mostly oil services to oil companies. And when the United States went into Iraq and took it over, Halliburton got a few multi-billion-dollar contracts with the federal government that they didn't even compete for. It was a no-bid contract, they called it. Now, this should not happen because the way the government procurement system is set up, it's set up to be a competition of who can give the lowest price to the government. But they just ended up giving it to Halliburton without any competition, and that created a big scandal.
Sorry about the music on that. I know it kind of took away from the content of what the guy was saying. But anyway, the point is, you know, all of these clips, really, I wanted to play them all together because they definitely, you know, to me have a little bit of a theme towards them. And again, that last clip, the takeaway from that is, you know, they had a situation with the war on terror and the Iraq war where, you know, that's where Halliburton got all these contracts with no bid contracts. And all of a sudden, you know, they got the rights to XYZ. They got the opportunity to rebuild XYZ. And that's happening right now, actually, in Ukraine. You know, we talked 6-8 months ago about how BlackRock was awarded all these, you know, rebuilding infrastructure deals with Ukraine. And this stuff is like, this is big business. This is 5, 10, 15-year payouts, but it's things that happen. And it's interesting, you know, the world is finally waking up to this stuff happening. Instead of it happening behind the scenes, they're waking up to it happening in front of our faces, and we're being exposed to it happening through platforms like TikTok. I mean, I will honestly say probably TikTok is the great exposer, and maybe that's why they want to get rid of it. I mean, maybe that's why they want to get rid of it. And I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because think about it. None of this level of critical thinking has ever taken place among this big of an audience with the ability to share that critical thinking as easily as you can with TikTok, and then that trickles down to Instagram and trickles down to Facebook. You know, I will say for you guys that are not on any of these, a lot of the really controversial content, let's just coin it or put it like that, the controversial content, it gets placed on TikTok initially, and then from TikTok, people are sharing it on Instagram and Facebook. Not as much YouTube. I mean, YouTube really puts the hammer down on censorship. You know, Google really does censor people and controversial content. So you're not seeing a lot of that on YouTube. And plus, like I shared previously, I think YouTube is more meant for that long form content, whereas this short form 60-second, 90-second stories and reels, this is being birthed on TikTok or placed on TikTok initially, and then that's leading to discovery and then placement on Instagram and Facebook. All right, I seriously have so much more content to play, but we are at 34 minutes almost, so I'm going to wrap it up. No song today. Call a spade a spade. Hope you're enjoying all this. I really do. Please let me know if you are. Please let me know if you want to hear anything else. Please let me know anything different. Please let me know your opinions. Please let me know when I'm doing good, bad, whatever. I am really good at taking feedback. I truly am. All right, call a spade a spade. Oh, by the way, Thursday's episode will be the interview that I did with the former CIA guy, Tariq Kaddoura, aka Joey Nobody. It's super interesting, but I just want to warn you, dude drops the F-bomb a lot. So there is parental discretion is advised for the moment. So anyway.
That was a great way to end it.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.